Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Benoit, the co-founder at Payflow. Benoit, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Awesome, and we are really excited to host you on the show. It's a very interesting venture, and you've been involved in a lot of them so far. So let us know a little bit more about you and Payflow.
Sure thing. So I'm Benoit. I'm Brazilian French. So I have a background of engineer. So always loved numbers. Always been looking at it, and then after quickly moved to consulting. And afterwards realized that I really wanted to do more than giving recommendations to others, and I really wanted to build my own venture. And this brings us to Payflow.
Awesome. And Payflow?
Yeah, sure. So Payflow is a mobile app that allows employees to get paid whenever they want, right? And we sell this as an employee benefit to companies, right? So there are a couple of elements here. One is that it's a service for employees, right? So it's really the employee that is using it, but it's the company that is buying it, right? So like take like a simple example, like if you've worked 3 days in a given month, then you can take your app and get those 3 days instantly in a private and secured way through an app, right? And this is something that has become basically a category, right? So a couple of years ago, it didn't have a name. Right now it has. So in the US, it's called ODP, On Demand Pay. In Europe, we know it more as EWA, Earned Wage Access. So super happy to be building the best funded startup of the category in the EU. So present in Spain and the Southern Europe and Latin America.
Got it. And of course, you have raised a 9.1 million A round. And in terms of headcount, so just to understand a little bit of the stage of growth, some metrics that you could share about where we are.
So we have about 50 people. That's quite a scary number, knowing that a couple of months ago we were barely 20 or 30. So we're really growing fast. And we're really I think, thanks to the recent round, we really entered the hyper growth phase where all the metrics are through the roof. So it's double digit or triple digit growth across the board.
Right. And of course, there is something really interesting related to why you started Payflow. So maybe I will not anticipate. So can you share a little bit more about the why?
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to share a little bit about the ideation process, which is, I think, something that we, at least we that work in non-venture, always think about, right? Like, how can I get to an idea? Like I don't have any idea. Can I be an entrepreneur if I don't have ideas? Like, exactly. So all those questions, right? So for my co-founder and myself, it was a bit different, because I think that most of the ventures will be built wherever entrepreneurs have either connection or market knowledge, or simply feel proximity with a certain market or a certain product. For us, it was built like consultants, right? So it was built like, hey, we're going to look at different ideas and we're going to look where it makes sense to do them. And if it does, and if it ticks all the boxes, then we'll scale it, right? And I think that for the specific idea of salary in advance, it's something that has about 10 years old, right? So like when we were, my co-founder and myself, studying in the US, so we met at MIT, where we were in the same fraternity. We actually got shocked by the fact that in other countries, we were both from Europe in a way, people are paid at different frequency, right? So like some people get paid twice a month, some people get paid once a week, right? So but the majority doesn't get paid once a month. And then it made us think, okay, why is so? Why do we get paid once a month? And then we started to investigate. And like hundreds of years ago, you were going back from working wherever you were working. And if you were bringing a bag of corn, then you were getting paid for this bag of corn, right? So you were paid per thing that you do, right? Per work
task
that you're doing, per task, exactly, right? And then there was kind of like back where companies put a pay cycle, right? And right now, in the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, we're going back to that, right? Not only was it with earned wage access, right? But thinking about it, the gig economy is exactly that, right? If you're an Uber driver, whenever you finish driving a passenger, then you get paid, right? If you're delivering food, or if you're working at Gorillas or at Glovo or any of those companies, right? Every time you bring something, you get paid, right? So there is a run towards more, everything should be more immediate, everything should be more flexible. And at the same time, the category of EWA exploded, right? So 8 years ago, it existed. You had a couple of companies in the US that we identified, and we really loved the model. And actually, everything got accelerated by the gig economy and by the whole pandemic that really reshuffled the deck.
That is really amazing, and to see how we think in different ways, in different geographies and different companies, and how the world is becoming more close to each other, and we are following the same kind of standards, and these kind of categories are exploding. It's also interesting that one of your focused areas in terms of geographical expansion, or even focus in terms of region, is LATAM.
Correct.
So yeah.
This is an interesting point, because we actually chose Spain. One of the reasons we chose Spain, apart from the market size, the market growth, the competitive landscape that was already very active, we really wanted to find a market where there is a market. We didn't want to invent a problem and then provide a solution. We really wanted to get somewhere where the problem was clear for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But a very important point was that if we start in Spain, then we have one foot that allows us to basically expand to Latin America if we see a better fit, and another one that tells us, hey, you can expand to Europe if you see a better fit, right? So for us, this was kind of clear from day one. And when we tested Latin America about 6-7 months ago, the numbers were amazing, right? So we always really want to kind of like listen to the market. So I think it's always like a test and looking at the numbers. And if the market tells us that there is a fit, then we will go there, right? And the numbers in Latin America were fantastic. We've seen an adoption that was through the roof, much higher than in our core market, despite the fact that the market was less mature for this specific category. So okay, like we were like, then in that case, we need to raise a bigger round and invest the majority of this round in Latin America, because this is where we see the potential for growth. Right? And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that the pay cycle is more frequent, right? So if you're getting paid more often, you're also spending more often. So that's one of the reasons why it makes sense to
Right.
to use a service less earned wage access. That's why in the US it's really booming, while in Europe it's a bit slower compared to other geographies. The second thing is, I think the way consumption is made, right? The relationship with money overall, right? Like I think it's good to spend in LATAM, right? It's not badly seen. Well, in Europe, sometimes there is more reluctance to overall spending, overall consuming, right? And that's why basically LATAM also makes it very very attractive. And I think the last thing is also from a customer readiness to try new things, right? So it's complete new service, right? You're changing the way people get paid. It's a big change, right? You put this in a company, it can be scary, right? It's like, oh wow, but like, will people use it? Will people like it? What do I want to be the first guy doing that, right? So there is really like a reluctance to change sometime, which you really have to a much lesser extent in Latin America, right? In Latin America is okay. Well, if it's free for the first 2 months, I will try it. If people don't like it, then I will remove it, right? But there is this energy to try new things overall, right? Which is really what we love, because when you're trying to disrupt the market, you want to go wherever people are open to it, right? And I think this is also one of the reasons why the fit is so good, because once you're putting it, without knowing if it's going to be good or bad, or people will like it, use it, or if it's going to be completely useless, then the product has such a fit that there is no way back. If you're getting paid on demand, you will never want to get paid once a month or twice a month or once per week.
Right.
There is no way back whatsoever, right? Which is why like this service is spectacular in Latin America, but also in Southeast Asia, in Africa. We have like a lot of friends doing that in those geographies where adoption is really high.
It's super interesting. I know that you've been involved in a previous venture in another region that was booming and that it's still booming a lot in Southeast Asia. So what has been some of the difference that you are seeing in terms of the Southeast Asia market and the LATAM market?
So I think it's a lot more similar than what we would think at first. I think that I think it's okay. So there are some things. So a lot of countries in Southeast Asia really have like completely leapfrogged a lot of dimensions, right? Like so payment, like there is no and a lot of those are coming to Latin America like with maybe like 6 months, 1 year, 2 years a bit late. So it's actually very interesting because sometimes what you're seeing in Southeast Asia is just a snapshot of the future, right? Like so while in other dimension, in other industries, actually the other way around, right? LATAM comes first, and then Latin America kind of like, and then after Southeast Asia actually it comes after. But it's very interesting because having a look at both, you can really, I mean, if it makes sense in one geography, it's very likely that it will make sense in another one. I think Southeast Asia has more complexity because you have like China influence. Also, you have like how like Southeast Asia, if you exclude. I mean, you have to exclude obviously India, China, which have completely different dynamics by themselves, right? But there are huge markets, right? Like there are markets that is, I mean, like think about the Philippines, think about Indonesia, right? Indonesia has almost more people living than in the United States, right? Like most people don't even know this country. It's the fourth biggest country in the world, right? After India, China, and the US, right? Like the capital has more people living than twice more people living than Portugal, right? Like it's really a scale that is completely different. And I think like mega cities are even more popular in Asia, right? So like it's you can build a business only being in one city there because it's the side of a country, right? Like in most of the European or even in the US, right? Which we have it to a lesser extent in Latin America.
Yeah, definitely. Jakarta is a
world. Exactly. Jakarta, Manila, like most of like they're really huge markets. It's I mean Vietnam alone is 100 million people. Like it's really huge. It's bigger than France, bigger than Germany, bigger than the UK. Like it's really huge market. So if you're like the spending, like the behaviors are different. Like you see, you're from a size perspective, you need to take that into account. But the adoption is much higher. You see, like if you would go to Europe or the US for a lot of services that you get from anything from finance to logistics, and if you look at how it's being done in Southeast Asia, you realize that wow, like we're actually quite late. We have a lot to learn, right? It's actually very interesting. Like I think like 10 years or like 10 years ago, like you had venture builders like that were copying things that worked in Europe and US, putting them in Asia. And actually right now it's the other way around. Like you're actually looking to what's being done in China and you're like, okay, I think we should do that in Europe now. Or like you see, it just went so fast.
And as you said, the region is very open to adopt new tech solutions and loves to experiment new solutions, etc. So definitely the culture also helps with that.
Yeah, the culture helps. I think it's an important point is that although it's a region, like the differences per countries are really huge. Yes. So like most of the players that won in the region is because they were really hyper local, right? Like so they had different teams, they had different value proposition per country, and they treated country very differently. They were not putting, like if it's a Singaporean company, they were not putting a Singaporean country manager in all of the countries in Southeast Asia. No, they were putting someone from the country in the country where they're opening, and they were giving significant freedom, right? And you had like very different approaches depending on where you go. And if you think about it from like so food delivery, right? And after like super apps, the whole Gojek and Grab right now. So Gojek now it's part of the Tokopedia group, and right now Grab had IPO, right? But when I was living in Asia, like it was much earlier than that, and you would see that both had very different approaches, right? Like one was like, okay, I want to focus on one market, which is Indonesia. The one was like, okay, I want to focus on many countries. But the hyper local was a key factor in winning, right? Like for those.
And I would say that this is also critical for Latin America, because Brazil and Mexico, for instance,
Yeah, completely. And it's true
very
that
different.
often we say, okay, like, yeah, we go to LATAM, right? But like the difference of doing business in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, or Venezuela have is just completely different. Like you cannot generalize most of the things, right? So like yes, you have the same language for majority of the countries except Brazil, but apart from that, you really have to treat them as if you were entering different markets, as if you didn't know, right? If you think you know, then you will make a mistake.
Okay. And in terms of language, it helps a bit compared to Southeast Asia, where, for instance, Vietnam and Thailand will need to adapt a lot to the local languages.
True. But it's I think it's still minor. The differences in overall, it's more cultural differences, like how people do things. Like you see, like how do people pay? How do people,
like
I don't know, get from A to B? How do people like these are
more than language.
More than language. Like the language will drive some cultural things that you need to keep in mind. But I would say it's not the major point, right? Like it's yeah.
I like it. And there is something interesting that you shared with me, and that we've been discussing a lot in the VC industry, about that we don't achieve product market fit at the global level. I think that's having our conversation about Southeast Asia and LATAM, this is really, really clear. I think that is a mistake that we do a lot of times. When we got into a scale-up mode, we forget that some of the regions might be in scale-up mode, but there are other regions that are in startup mode, and we need to apply different methodologies and different rules and even different personalities of the teams that are leading those regions.
Completely, I think, and this is something that there's actually a big learning that we got from a couple of YC companies. So we had the opportunity to be in Y Combinator during the last summer, and we learned a lot. And I think YC is obsessed with product market fit, and in a good way. I think it's really refreshing to see that. I mean, you take a YC mug and it's written "make something people want," right? This is the main thing about YC. Like there is no other thing. Like it's not about money, not about, like, it's really about, if you do find product market fit, then everything else will follow, right? And I think that product market fit at a global scale is very difficult to achieve, and I don't think it's possible. I think you always have to make changes and to adapt your product. And for us, we're seeing it every day, right? Like for instance, some services we want to launch in Colombia, we're not even going to think about launching them in Spain, because actually when we do focus groups and when we talk to the users, like in Spain, there is 0% of people that want it, or like 5%, right? And in LATAM, there's 95%. So it's that different, right? So you need to have your product roadmap, and you need to have the way what you're building that is really adapted. And actually you can't just have that centralized in your country, where in your headquarters, and think that you can achieve that product market fit. You really have to localize this.
And then it comes really how to define those priorities, right? So we can't be developing customized products for each of the countries at the same time. So we might need to pick some of the regions to accelerate.
Yeah, for sure. I think you see, like what you have to do is, once you're defining like why you want to build that, is that because you want to grow MRR? Is that because you want to grow customer base? Is that because you want to grow like overall adoption, retention? Is that because you see you want to build something that becomes more attractive for potential partners in the industry? So you have plenty of reasons. You put that in the balance, and then you decide, right? But you should crystallize why you're doing one thing or another. So you should crystallize the reason for making something a priority, and then it goes at local level, right?
Absolutely.
But the output is global. I mean, you see, if it increases MRR by 2%, then it increases MRR by 2%, right? If something increases MRR by 3% and it's another feature in another country, then you will choose this one, right? if MRR is your main KPI.
To see the impact, and it's refreshing to see that nowadays we are really having in consideration all the impacts of the different revenue seats, so products, customer success, marketing, and sales, and not only sales as in the traditional way.
Correct. And I think, and there are a lot of like also non-financial goals that you can have, right? Like you also can put, I know, like how much impact that is actually bringing, like how many people you're helping, how many jobs you're creating, like all of those goals that are not financial, right? Like and they come because
just revenue.
Correct. Not only revenue, right? Like you have a mission, and if your mission is to basically help people feel like more financial freedom, if you want to bring financial well-being, then that can be a goal. You quantify it, but that's not only monetary. That's really in terms of impact.
Something also interesting, and you talked about that. So giving teams flexibility and autonomy to define different strategies for each country, and not kind of monopolize everything and decide everything from the headquarters perspective, because they are a little bit not so close to the market. They don't understand what is going on. So this accelerates the need of going into a kind of a matrix organization instead of a functional organization. So I've seen a lot of companies going from A to B, not understanding that they would need to move from a functional organization into a matrix organization. Even if they are in the US, they might want to divide the focus in different regions, or in different kind of business units. And of course, as we were discussing before, it's different if a business unit is just starting up, and we will need that business unit a little bit later when we are going from 5 to 10 in that business unit, and overall from 10 to 20 or 20 to 50 million. We need to start planting it now. And of course, again, the person that is leading that business unit needs to have a different mindset from one which is around already 10 million and needs to go into 20 million. So any tips on how to build this team on a matrix organization that usually it's a little bit painful from the ones who are used to lead functional organizations?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you see, like, so obviously on Payflow, we have a scale that is much lower, but I did a lot of org projects for multinational companies while in consulting, right? So I mean, I've looked at this question a lot. So there are a few things to consider. One is like, if you already have a certain org structure, is extremely difficult to change. And you need to think about like a proper rollout about the new structure. So you will have a transition phase that will be very messy. But overall, this is a very different question. I think like the question is, when you're a scale up, when you're starting operations, how to start them right. I think the main thing is that you shouldn't there is like a very thin line between having too much process and too much complexity and not being able to go fast and actually just trying things out. It's for us, we at the very beginning, when we open a country, we like to give the country a lot of autonomy, right? So like they can leverage whatever is being done in another country, but it's really a lot of freedom, right? And maybe the departments will even be different in another country, right? So in that sense, it doesn't even like this framework doesn't even work, right? Because maybe you don't have ops in a country, or ops is slightly different, or they're taking other things, right?
Makes sense.
So I think so you always need to think in terms of size. Obviously, like if the countries you're starting actually becomes almost as big of a business as the original country, then you probably need to standardize more, right? But overall, for me, I don't really see an issue in having very different structures in different countries, because it will allow you to, again, so the main question you need to ask is like, how much synergies you have among countries, right? So do you have sales synergies, right? So are your clients in Spain going to be present in Colombia, in Mexico, in Brazil? That's the first thing. Then you have product synergies, like are you, and if most of the answers is not really, then it's very clear. Then you should have countries almost as standalone and as 100% owned, but almost as a different company, right? Like you have, and you need to look at your organization after having launched after having input from the customers, from the teams on the ground, make a list of everything, all the functions, all the departments, and think what actually makes sense to have standardized and to have under the same umbrella, and what doesn't, right? And probably the answer is something hybrid, right? That, okay, I don't know, debt makes sense to be centralized because you have huge economies of scale if you borrow more. A sales doesn't make sense to be standardized, like you'll have like a very different, very local
Right.
way of selling. Partnerships very different. You don't have partnerships at regional, or not really that many. Like, so you really need to
It's
think
nice.
from that perspective. You will probably, on paper, you might lose of economies of scale because you're thinking that you're hire a developer in a country and in another one. But in reality, you're not really, because you're still leveraging the knowledge. Everything that makes sense to have standardized, you already have it standardized. And as long as you're good at knowledge transfer from a country to another one, you will move faster and you will have a better output than if you go fully for one structure or the other.
Exactly. Kind of having a squad mindset on that
Correct.
approach.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Instead of maybe it helps for the one who are not very used with the functional and matrix organizations, really thinking about the squad that needs to keep adapting to the stage of growth of the company in that local country.
Right. Correct.
And any insights on if the country manager or the MDs should sit at the leadership team layer with some of the functions, or would you prefer to have someone as the head of expansion? Of course, I know that you are still building that and recruiting a lot of people now, but
I
maybe
mean,
you
look,
already have some ideas.
it's a very good question. We're thinking about it actually. We're not sold on the answer. I think it depends on the profiles. Each profile has different ambition. You also need to take that into account. You don't want to stop people from growing if they can, and if they prove that they can grow. I think they should grow. I would say generally speaking, it can become very messy if every single country manager sits in the leadership, because you will just have too much. But I think that at least when you start, it's okay, as long as you manage well expectation to be like, okay, like we just have 1, 2, 3 more countries, but as soon as we have 10, then we're going to have to kind of have someone to centralize it. And that might be you if you do A, B, and C, but this is going to be what will happen in like 2 or 3 years from now. So so in the short term, you have all the benefits from having the knowledge and all the knowledge from the new countries to be basically transferred to the whole organization, which is really great because a lot of things are applicable. And you also kind of like don't completely shut the door to having a structure that is more efficient further down the line whenever you grow. But it should be clear, right? Like you cannot like promise, you cannot have it's very difficult to change a structure for the worse for people that are in the structure. So you need to manage that very well. This is part of the organizational debt, right? Like it's if you do things and you think it's okay, then you keep paying those interest, and then after when you wanna change it, it's very painful.
Right. That's why I like to say that scaling up is kind of science and art. There are principles and patterns that always serve us well, but there are certain specificities that it's a little bit of art to understand what to do in specific stages of growth. And every single company, every single team, every single person is different. So we need to be able to understand what to do, and of course to make the wrong decision and then correct it as quickly as possible.
And that's correct, right? And I think it's really driven by like fundamentally, like you see, if you have a product that is going to be the same everywhere in the world, because simply like or very, very slight differences, and in the countries you're only going to have people selling, for instance, the answer is very different, because in that case you only have one department per country, and it's and everything, I mean, and it makes more sense to be centralized if there is
almost marketing, sales, and CS.
Exactly, right? Well, if you have a product that has to be very local from a tech standpoint, this is where it kind of changes it, right?
Yeah, and at the same time, we might have more complexity involving product, but at the same time we might have a mold, and as you said, to have more adaptation, more hyper localization to the needs of each segment and each country that might serve us a little bit later as a moat for people to enter the market, right?
Exactly.
And the good thing there is also having the approach, as you were saying, of kind of treating the country manager or the MD kind of as a venture of the portfolio, that they would have almost a board meeting every single quarter to talk with the leadership team at the global level about what is going on and make decisions. And kind of giving that team a lot of autonomy, as you were saying. They are kind of reporting on a monthly or quarterly basis, and of course with the intent of trying to help those countries to develop, and not just to see what is going on and to control what they are doing. Other way, it might be also to have some geos in the leadership team that might be core. It might be in the short term in terms of scaling up, or in the midterm in terms of starting up markets that are really, really critical. Let's think about that we are already very well advanced in Mexico, and we are scaling up Mexico. It might make sense for that team or for that MD to sit down at the leadership team table. And maybe we are just starting up Brazil, but it's so complex that it might sense also to have a weekly update on what is going on that market.
Right? Exactly. I think it's you should treat that as intrapreneurship almost, and like as if you were creating a new company with your company, right? Like imagine you would be investing, or if you would be buying a company in a local country, you're not going to, I mean, you would want to be very close, and you would want to have that type of structure. So that's the way I think you should be treating expansion.
Absolutely. I love it. That's a great point. And of course, what's next for Payflow? What means success in the next chapter until you raise the B round?
For us, there are a couple of things that we want to achieve. So the first one is obviously commercial. We wanna show traction. We want to show like a growth of the user base. We want to show that hundreds of thousands of employees can be using the tool. We'd love to get closer to 1 million users on our platform, right? Like that would be a major milestone. Mm-hmm. One thing that we wanna also prove is that we can scale the product internationally, because most people have not succeeded, and I don't think we can consider ourselves successful yet about it. Like we still have like traction that is just starting, is less than 6 months. You see, nothing is done yet. We really want to achieve. We really want to dominate the market where we're going, and I think that it's not a matter of entering 10 countries in 2 years. It's more a matter of like 2, 3, maybe 4 countries. We're really becoming very strong there and really understanding the countries, because we want to prove that we can do it. Because if we do that, then after it's just a matter of having more money and replicating that, right? But we really want to understand, have like a proper expansion playbook that exactly tells us like, okay, what do we need to do? What are the things we need to be careful about? Because if we go too fast and start in 15 countries, we will never have time to learn. So I think we need to give ourselves the time to really understand how to crack it, because no one has. So it means it's complicated. And I think the last thing is in terms of product. So we're in a market that is extremely competitive, as we mentioned earlier, right? Like 133, I think, or 2 competitors in the world. It's changing every day. We want to understand the market, where people are where is this market going, and we want to have features, and we want to have a product that overall makes sense in that context, right? So like meaning that we really want to listen to the customers, we really want to listen to our users and also our clients, but we also want to listen to the market, like where is EWA, where is salary in advance going? Like you see, it's and this is an important point of the product roadmap. Like it's we really haven't cracked it. Like what do you do next? Salary in advance is a great foot in the door, but what do you do next? Right. So it's a great foot in the door that has great economics, but that doesn't build $1 billion business, right? So like it's you have a couple of scenarios, and we want to test a few, and to be able to have a better answer to that question by the time we go and raise a larger round, because this is how we will unlock like the full potential of this great of this great foot in the door, basically, right?
So there is still a business model puzzle to solve in
There
a
is.
certain way.
Yes, I think, I mean, the business model of the core is pretty clear, but I think it's more in terms of like, what do you launch that is even more successful, that is even that really uses what you have to build $1 billion business, right? So I think this is the main question, right? And really, and I think the last thing that we want to do by Series B is to understand understand really well the competitive dynamics and like who is doing what where, right? Like so like we've already mapped most of the competitors. We've talked to probably 50 or 60 of them, so almost half of where.
Nice.
So we really want to understand that, and the reason for it is because we really think that in the midterm this is an M&A market, and we really want to be the ones who consolidate it and who built a global salary in advance venture. So we really want to have that. We really want to clear that that question mark, right? So we really want to understand like who is growing, how, like what is the funding by waves of funding, right? Like who has passed already the seed, who has already the Series A, like who is doing well, who's not doing so well, what type of geographies, what type. So all of that, because the next round will be partly an M&A round, and will be a round for us to start consolidating this market.
This is interesting, also using M&A as a more common tool in VC and early on to accelerate expansion, right? Because as you said, the countries and the cultures are so different in the regions that, of course, if we need to prove product market fit, build a brand locally, expand, etc., it will take us at least 3 to 5 years instead of buying a player that already has done that and start scaling.
No, completely. And I think you see, like, I mean, historically, that there was a bit of a taboo of M&A at early stage. I mean, early is Series B, C. You see, not seed stage, obviously, but like you start to already have figured out something about your business. Like usually M&A was something that's unicorns were looking at, but more importantly, like established companies and big industrial groups.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Or even like mostly industrial group, right? Like, I mean, M&A from unicorns started a couple of years ago. You see, like before there was no activity, right? This is going down in the stage of development of the companies that people start to see that there is an opportunity, right? Because it looks scary, and it looks like, yeah, like we're too young to do this, right? While it can, if it's well done, unlock tremendous potential, right? So yeah, we're quite bullish on that. Again, like definitely not a priority for the next 2 years, but will become something very important in 2 to 4 years from now.
I would love to cover much more topics, but we are coming to the end of the show, and of course I'd like to wrap up by asking you one of our favorite questions, which is, if you would have the opportunity to have a coffee with yourself at the beginning of Payflow, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
I think it's that's already to some extent what we were told, but it's to rush to launch and to rush to get users feedback as fast as possible, and really like don't be afraid of having a half-baked product when you're launching, because that's the way you will go faster, especially in a market where it's an absolute race. So it's something that we always don't do enough as what I would say true entrepreneurs, so people that have been only entrepreneurs in their lives, that have never worked for anyone, probably they have that in their blood, right? But like when you've been working in larger companies, when you've been like working in consultancy, we've been doing all of that, like you don't like to have a slide with mistakes, and you don't like to show a product with issues, right? But you should not do this. Fundamentally, you should break that and be like, okay, I'll just do it because I'm gonna launch 2 months earlier, and maybe what I'm about to launch is stupid and I need to change something, right? So this is difficult for whoever is not entrepreneur by nature, and who became an entrepreneur after having worked a couple of years, and that would be really the main point.
So launching as soon as possible, as quickly to get us
rush to launch,
to get feedback as soon as possible, and cross correct.
100%.
Benoit, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show, and good luck with the next steps.
Thanks, Mike.
And to you, we keep bringing you the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. See you soon, and keep scaling.